The meeting that celebrated keeping the promise and momentum on children's rights beyond commemorating 30 years of the UNCRC. So I'd like to start with a thank you. I'd like to start by thanking our partners and those who are working with us to make this session happen over the next hour. Those partners are first of all the Permanent Mission of Bulgaria, the Permanent Mission of Jamaica and the Permanent Mission of Luxembourg, the member states who are our co-sponsors, and then agencies and organisations, Child Fund Alliance, thank you Meg, Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children, thank you Howard, World Vision, that'd be us then, Plan International, Lumos Foundation, Arigato International, Save the Children and UNICEF. So I'd like to thank them particularly for making this afternoon happen and for bringing us a room full of people as we celebrate CRC at 30. So we're going to start by just reflecting on what happened this morning. The high-level meeting over the road was a really momentous occasion for many of us. When CRC was envisioned in 1989, there were bigger ambitions, but this is a widely ratified convention, and it's really powerful that we've got so many member states to sign up. But the question is, what happens next? And how do we prompt action to keep child rights on the agenda? And how, particularly, do we keep children's voices front and centre as we look to what happens over the next 30 years? So I've got some very special guests that I'm going to be welcoming here today. I'm going to welcome them one by one. First of all, I'd like to welcome Lucas from the Czech Republic. Since this is the CRC, we thought it was absolutely apt and right to have children lead these sessions. So Lucas, could I welcome you to the podium, please? Lucas from the Czech Republic.
Dobrý den, jsem Lukáš a jsem z České republiky.
Good morning, my name is Lukáš and I come from the Czech Republic.
Prosím, chci, abyste se zamysleli a představili si úmluvu o právech dětí.
Now I would ask you to think and to imagine what you think when I say the CRC.
Já si představuji, že všechny děti by měly mít stejná práva, ale myslím si, že svých zkušeností nejsou úplně tak dokonalá.
From my own experience, I think, or what I think is that all the children should have the same rights. But from my own experience, I don't think they are fulfilled the same way.
Myslím si, že jedno z nejdůležitějších práv je právo vyrůstat v rodině, ale ne na papíře, ale cítit se být milován.
For me, one of the most important rights is the right to have a family, to be brought up in a family. But I don't mean it only on a paper, but I mean to be really raised by loving people in loving surroundings.
Už od 9 let vyrůstám v instituci.
I've been living in an institution since I was 9 years old.
Jsem rád, že mi byla poskytnuta pomoc, ale myslím si, že to šlo udělat líp.
And I'm really glad that they offered me help, but I think they could have done it in a better way.
Myslím si, že se mohli zeptat mý širší rodiny, jestli by si mě nikdo nevzal, měl jsem mohl jít do pěstounské péče.
For example, what they could have done is to ask my wider family if they wanted to take care of me, or they could have placed me in a foster family.
Jsem vděčný za to, že jsem nevyrůstal na ulici, ale vzala mi to bohužel rodinu.
And I'm really glad that I didn't end up on a street, but I think it took my family away from me.
Ústav byl pro mě horší, protože mi nedal takovou lásku jako rodina.
And the facility was worse for me than living in a family, because they couldn't offer me the help, the love that I would get from a family.
Prosím, chci, abyste se zamysleli, jestli se tohle může dít i ve vašich zemích.
Now I want you all to think if a story like that could be now happening in your country, perhaps.
Myslím si ze své zkušenosti, že vlády jsou pomalý a mnoho jim to trvá.
What I know from my experience is that the processes take too long and the governments are their decision making takes too long.
Myslím si ze své zkušenosti, že málo podporují rodinu a pěstounskou péči.
From my point of view, what I also think is a problem is that the governments, they don't support the families, the biological families enough.
Myslím si, že by měli naslouchat mladí dospělí a děti.
And what I also think is important is to listen to the young voices, to young children and young adults.
Myslím si, že úmluva není úplně dokonalá, protože kdyby byla dokonalá, tak bych tady nestal a nemluvil bych svůj příběh.
And I also think that the CRC is not fulfilled 100% by 100%, because if it was, I wouldn't be standing here.
A byl bych doma a poznal bych pravou lásku.
And I would be at home with my family and I would know a real parental love.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucas. That was very, very moving. And just before I invite our next guest, I forgot to introduce myself. So my name is Andrew Morley. I'm the President and CEO of World Vision International. It's my privilege to be comparing here this afternoon. So our second guest is Salimata from Mali, and she's going to tell you her story. Can I welcome Salimata?
Bonjour tout le monde, je suis Salimata, je viens du Mali, j'ai 14 ans.
Hello everyone, I'm Salimata from Mali, I'm 14 years old.
Je suis honorée d'être parmi vous aujourd'hui. Merci de m'avoir donné cette opportunité pour m'exprimer devant ce grand événement, dans lequel nous sommes tous réunis, qui est le 30e anniversaire des droits des enfants.
I'm honored to be here today and I thank you for giving me this opportunity to express myself in front of you in this great event where we are all gathered to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Convention on the Right of the Child.
Nous les enfants, nous sommes vraiment reconnaissants envers ceux qui luttent pour nos droits. Et nous vous remercions pour tout ce que vous êtes en train de faire pour nous en ce moment.
As children, we are truly grateful to those who fight for our rights and we thank you for all what you are doing for us now.
Nous vous demandons de continuer cette bonne lutte, car à présent dans nos communautés, particulièrement au Mali, des millions d'enfants n'ont pas accès à l'éducation et la majorité sont des filles.
We ask you to continue this good fight because now in our communities, especially in Mali, millions of children do not have access to education and the majority are girls.
Beaucoup de filles sont forcées à abandonner l'école à cause du mariage, travaux d'aide ménagère et parce que les parents préfèrent donner cette opportunité aux garçons parce qu'ils croient que les garçons méritent le succès beaucoup plus que les filles.
Many girls are forced to drop out from school because of marriage, housework, and because parents prefer to give this opportunity to boys because they believe that boys deserve success in life, not girls.
Environ 50% des jeunes filles maliennes sont mariées avant l'âge de 15 ans, et ce qui est une injustice envers les jeunes filles.
About 50% of young Malayan girls are married before the age of 15, which is an injustice towards young girls.
Une fille éduquée et épanouie est source de progrès et d'espérance. Une fille non émancipée est source de dépendance.
An educated and fulfilled girl is a source of progress and hope. A non-emancipated girl is a source of dependency.
Actuellement au Mali, selon une recherche qui a été effectuée en octobre 2019, 1051 écoles sont non fonctionnelles à cause de l'insécurité au nord et au centre du pays.
Currently in Mali, according to a search conducted in October 2019, 1,051 schools are non-functional because of the insecurity in the north and in the center of the country.
Cela n'est pas seulement le cas au Mali. Des millions d'enfants dans le monde entier ne vont pas à l'école. Ils sont forcés à travailler dans de mauvaises conditions. Ils n'ont pas accès à l'eau potable. Des millions d'enfants ne bénéficient pas de soins médicaux. Ils n'ont même pas de quoi manger. Ils sont victimes d'attaques terroristes.
This is not happening only in my country, Mali. Millions of children around the world don't go to school. They are forced to work in poor conditions. They do not have access to clean water. Millions of children do not receive medical care. They do not even have enough money to eat and are victims of terrorist attacks.
En tant que groupe d'enfants, nous contribuons par plusieurs moyens à sensibiliser les parents, enseignants, les leaders religieux et les enfants à changer leur comportement.
As children's group, we contribute in many ways to educate parents, teachers, religious leaders, and children to change their behavior.
Par exemple, durant les cérémonies organisées par World Vision, on organise des pièces de théâtre et de poésie, parfois des chansons sur les méfaits du mariage des enfants.
For example, during World Vision ceremonies, we organize plays, poetries, and songs about the bad effects of child marriage.
Lors des cérémonies de fin d'année à l'école, nous prenons comme le plus souvent le thème du théâtre, la scolarisation et maintien des jeunes filles à l'école.
At the end of year ceremonies at school, we take the theme of schooling and keeping girls in school.
Nous pensons le plus souvent que le mieux c'est de sensibiliser à travers des pièces de théâtre, car la majorité de la population est analphabète.
We believe that the best way to raise awareness is through plays because the majority of the population is illiterate.
Chers auditeurs, il est temps de faire quelque chose pour nous et avec nous. Pour tous les enfants du monde entier, nous méritons tous une vie meilleure.
Dear listener, it's time to do something for us. For all the children of the world, we all deserve a better life.
Comme un adage le dit, ensemble nous pourrons. C'est pour cela que nous vous invitons à nous joindre pour lutter contre l'injustice que nous endurons chaque jour.
As the saying goes, together we can. That's why we invite you to join us to fight against the injustice we endure every day.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Salimata. And the call to say that children deserve better is very well said, very powerful. Thank you for sharing your experience. I wish I could have spoken like that in front of people at 14-year-old. That was very impressive. Well done. The next person I'd like to invite up to the front is Fong Saban, and his friends call him To, so we will call you To. To is from Lao People's Democratic Republic, so over to you, To.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my country, Laos People's Democratic Republic, is a landlocked, least developed, and mountainous country. It's also a lower middle-income country with 6.4 million people. 2.5 million people are children, and now presents our visions and challenges and solutions by children, and a proposed solution to be supported by adults on the development of Lao generation 2030. First on the vision for 2030, we expect for quality education, more practices learning, e-learning, the use of trial, reuse, reduce and recycle, better people for climate change, improve healthcare and nutrition, and appropriate platforms for allow for children to exchange knowledge and skills, art, sport and talent internally and overseas. Challenge. We are facing with a limited opportunity to access e-learning and using advanced technology for the education and practices. Limited access to quality and healthcare and nutrition. Platforms our opportunity to share our opinions and the talents outside of school and abroad. Leads to cyberbullying and online abuse. Solution. To solve all the challenges, we should pay more attention to the teachers and use our free time to practice and use the internet for e-learning, peer-to-peer learning, and promote TRIA, and presenting our talents, potentials, and opinions in any opportunity. With these actions by children, I have been a volunteer and a trainer with my friends in Saipan Laos project to raise and awareness to my peers on Lao rights, particularly on the child self online and sexual reproductive health, and rights for children and young people in my school and my community. After the Lao Children Forum in 2018, the Child Fund is give opportunity for us to list all the small projects for us, and there is all activities, especially on the environment protections, including the private cleaning actions in every Saturday and Sunday at the morning in my school and in other public places, with advocates to everyone to care more about the environment. Propose solution from adults to support and assist us for unleashing our unlimited potential of the Lao generation 2018 to make us realize our goals in 2030. We are seeking your consideration in supporting us in 4 areas, namely provide the digital device and internet for e-learning, expanding free time metronome and the child care service, and school lunch for all the children, and promote the use of TRIA in school and all public areas. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, To. And again, To's just 15 years old. You spoke with such clarity and confidence. Well done. That was very impressive. So we thought it just right to start with the voices of children when we're speaking about the CRC and this birthday today, this 30th anniversary. I'd now like to introduce somebody who's really leading this conversation and allowing children to really speak into this anniversary and bringing new energy to this celebration. I'd like to introduce a good friend and the UNICEF Executive Director, Henrietta Ford. It seems strange inviting you to your podium in your house, but please do take a microphone.
So thank you very much, and indeed, welcome to UNICEF House. So most of you have been over at the General Assembly celebrating World Children's Day. So can we all just say together, Happy World Children's Day? Everybody ready? Happy World Children's Day. Okay, great. And you haven't been stamped? You can be stamped outside. But yes, good. Okay, so raise your hand if you've been stamped. Okay, oh good, we've got some stamps. Okay, so get stamped. So on behalf of all of UNICEF and our staff members worldwide, we want to thank our partners from civil society who have organized today's meeting, and to make sure that we think of ourselves as a collective, as partners that are in this work together. And so thank you, Andrew, for being our designated representative and speaking and gathering all of us. It is indeed a big moment for all of us. The Convention on the Rights of the Child changed how we thought about ourselves. And at the 30th anniversary, one of the things we are asking of everyone is not just to advocate for rights, but let's get to work and realize some of these rights. You can see that we've got young people who are absolutely rolling up their sleeves and want to be doing this with us. So we've got all the right people to be part of this. So let's really agree today that we can be a much better alliance, that we can really move on these rights. So we really need everyone's ideas and energies to help us build the future. I said at this morning's event that our task today is to both celebrate the progress of the last 3 decades, but that we also needed to finish the job that we started in 1989. So it is the partners in this room and so many others who have been central to the progress that we have made, to the lives that have been improved since that time. As we all know, there are more children that are fed and educated. There are more that are accessing water and sanitation, more that are protected from child marriage, more that are surviving their 5th birthdays than at any time in history. But we also know that your voices and commitment are essential. It's not enough. We have not reached enough. So it is going to be important that we take these next steps as being critical steps. We are coming out with some momentum out of this anniversary. So let us use it to really be constructive together. We'll hear about many more of the challenges that both old and new that young people are experiencing. But I think that one of the things we have failed them on is that we have a world that has far too many conflicts. And with these conflicts, it just means for all of us that we have an increasing workload. We have more and more children and families that we are looking after. So we must try to do our best as the grown-ups to try to stop many of these conflicts and try to prevent them. So the more that we can talk about social cohesion in schools and in communities will really help. We also find that there's a big discussion on health outcomes, both the nutrition side for children, but also health. We do not have enough community health care. Some of you have been working on this extremely strongly. It is one of the areas that we have banded together with the World Health Organization, but we haven't done enough. So help us all as a community to move forward on that. And then climate change. Everyone is talking about ways that they can really help on the perils of climate change. When I was just in Nepal, we visited a school that was going out in their 5-block area, and they were mapping where the water tank was, where the rubbish heap was, if there were any chemicals or any things that were put out in the streets that might harm either the water systems or the children that were playing in the streets. But they mapped it. They loved doing it. They felt they were an agent of change. So we need to do more of those kinds of programs so that young people, all of their extraordinary enthusiasm for climate change, that we can channel it into really important programs. So today, I just know that everyone is carrying children in the center of their agenda, but we need to tell it to everyone that we meet. All of your friends and family, everyone that you work with, the children really should be at the center. We need to convince governments, and thus it is a pleasure to see our 3 ambassadors who lead the group of friends here at the United Nations. They have been stalwart. They have been calling for change. They have not relented. So please tell them thank you today before you leave. But more than ever, I wanted to thank the young people. It is because of you, it is your voices, it is your enthusiasm, your strength that we will all count on as we move as a group of friends moving forward for child rights. Thank you all very much.
And speaking of group of friends, it's my pleasure and privilege to invite Ambassador Mr. Christian Brown, the permanent representative of Luxembourg. He is speaking on behalf of the co-chairs of the group of friends on children in the SDGs, so that's Jamaica, Bulgaria and Luxembourg. So Ambassador Brown, if you could take the lectern, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Madam Executive Director, dear friends, young friends, dear children. The 30th anniversary commemoration today reminds us, the UN community, about children's rights and their main principles of the UN Convention regarding the rights to survival, development, protection and participation of children. For the member states of the groups of friends of children and the SDGs, it was important that this was not just a celebratory moment, but rather an opportunity for governments to reaffirm the tangible commitments for children throughout the year. As advocates, we ask ourselves how to keep child rights in the entire ecosystem in a more sustainable way, and we see emerging challenges and threats to the rights of children. In any case, the group of friends is committed to keeping children's rights high on the UN agenda. Today's event is timely, wanting to explore solutions to some of those challenges and threats, while at the same time generate a discussion on what the SDG decade of accelerated action means for children. To keep a momentum on children's rights, we need to look at SDG implementation and how it can contribute to the realization of children's rights. The synergy between these two cannot be understated. The group of Friends Advocacy for the Children of the Rights 30th anniversary, CRC 30, has focused on linking the fulfillment of children's rights to the implementation of the SDGs. The launch of the voluntary pledge for every child, every right by the group of Friends co-chairs aimed to encourage member states to renew their commitment to the timeless principles of child's right and increase or accelerate action towards their fulfillment through child-centered policies, enhanced investment and allocation of resources, and reinforced partnership. Currently, there are more than 30 member states and state parties of the convention who align on the pledge, which I think is a big success. There are obviously new challenges for the protection of children. Protection of children is highly complex because of some of these issues. They need protection. We refer to issues that have deeply rooted causes: child marriage, child soldier, age and sex discrimination. Millions of children suffer of conflicts, like Madam Executive Director has said. Climate change is another big challenge, and children are disproportionately affected by shocks and stress to climate change and natural disasters. Ending all forms of violence against children is essential to achieve peaceful and inclusive society. And one of the forms, and it's a very important form to do so, is through legislation by legally banning all forms of violence. I don't want to be too long, but what is very encouraging is the presence of so much young people and children today for this event. The topic that the group of friends has continued to push all the time is for meaningful participation of children and youth on the implementation and review of the SDGs. For this reason, we have included children and youth wherever it was possible as guest speakers in several of our group's meetings to give a platform to share with member states their experience and their perspective, and I'm very happy that they were able to do so also this morning and for this afternoon. And thank you very much once more for coming to us.
Thank you, Ambassador Braun, and thank you to the whole group of friends. They are deep friends of ours and really helpful in our work in this area. So rather than just having the children and youth speakers as kind of a token introduction, we thought we'd try something a little different this afternoon. So we're going to have a panel that's actually moderated by two of the youths. So if I could ask Lucas and Salimata to take their seats, please. And what they're going to do is they're going to be asking questions from two people from civil society. So Lucas and Salimata, if you'd like to take your seats.
Howard, I would like to ask you, what do you think is the maximum that we could do to prevent violence against children?
Thank you. Thank you. Hello. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Lucas, for the question. Thanks everyone for coming, into Henrietta and the UNICEF team for hosting us again here at UNICEF House. I think it's a great question, and I would actually say a very simple answer is there's no maximum amount that any of us could and should be doing to end violence against children until we get to zero. That's the ambition of SDG 16.2, that we get to zero by 2030. We are 4 years, I was sitting calculating, I think we're 50 months in, from when 193 heads of government sat just over the road in the General Assembly and agreed the Sustainable Development Goals. Each one of those 193 heads of government committed to all of the SDGs, including 16, including 16.2, including a commitment to end all forms of violence, abuse and neglect against children. So one of the things we need to do is to hold them to account, hold those political leaders and governments to account. But another is to support them, to encourage them and to support them in making progress against SDG 16.2.
Ještě bych se vás prosím chtěl zeptat, co pro vás znamená ochrana dětí, co si pod tím představíte?
And I would also like to ask you, when we say prevention, what do you imagine?
Yeah, thank you. So I have the great privilege to represent the Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children. I sometimes say that is the longest named, least known, most ambitious partnership that's out there. Let's spread the word, not about the partnership, but about the agenda to end violence against children. We are a collaborative of 370 members, governments, civil society organizations, many in the room today, media, academics, children themselves, and other sectors. And every member of that partnership holds dear a number of things. I won't go through them all, but we know and we believe that it is the right of every child to grow up safe and secure. And today, a momentous day, as we mark, and as Henrietta said, we both celebrate progress, but we mark and we call out the action that's needed to actually realise the rights of every single child that grows up in this world, wherever they may live. So we hold dear to the rights, but to get ahead of the enormous epidemic of violence against children, which is 1 billion children every year experiencing some kind of violence, abuse and neglect, we also need to complement the rights-based case by making the investment case. So I often say that it's both the right thing to end violence against children, but it's a smart investment to make. And the ambassador just said just now about ending violence against children is an important part of the broader inclusivity agenda, and we know it matters for delivering on many other SDGs in health, in education, etc. So it's the right thing to do, it's the smart investment to make, and it's possible. We're already seeing encouraging signs of progress. Many grassroots organizations, many international NGOs here today, UN agencies, donors and others, and governments themselves around the world working to end violence against children. I happened to have the great privilege yesterday of addressing the Jamaican Parliament on the day when the Jamaican government, with the help of some in the room and beyond, launched a national action plan to end all violence against children. But my privilege was nothing as to seeing the 4 Jamaican children who historically addressed Parliament in the main chamber for the first time. Very powerful advocates for change, calling on their government to make a difference, and not just to launch a plan and to have great rhetoric and get the headlines for a day, but looking up to the gallery full of CSOs and other young people, and both the opposition and the government calling on them to, frankly, put their money where their mouth is and deliver against the plan. And it was really encouraging to see the bipartisan support, both from the opposition leader and from the Prime Minister himself. And I share that as some of the ingredients, not all of the ingredients, of how we're going to get ahead of this enormous burden, this epidemic of violence against children, but some of the ingredients that we know: partnership, political leadership, resources, evidence, best practice, data. We know the ingredients that are needed to get this done. And I often feel that it's on us in rooms like this, who probably vehemently agree about a lot of this stuff, to take this message, as Andrew and others have said already this morning, beyond rooms like this. We have to raise awareness, we have to make the case to broader constituencies of the public, of leaders, whatever sector they are in, to galvanize a larger movement behind this agenda, and make the case so it's frankly what some might say a no-brainer to actually do this work and end violence against children.
Thank you very much.
Professor Anantana, we are happy. Professor Anantana, We are happy you can join this panel. You will speak to us about a study on the role of religious leaders and religious community in promoting children's rights and to prevent violence against children. These leaders and community are playing a big role. Please tell us about the study.
Thank you very much, Salimata. Greetings, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak a little bit about this study, which is really hot off the press, just released, on faith and children's rights, a multi-religious study on the Convention on the Rights of the Child. So in order to celebrate and to mark the 30th anniversary of the Convention, Arigato International initiated this multi-religious global study to focus on the role of religious leaders and communities as advocates for the rights of children. We were fortunate to have many good partners, UNICEF, World Vision. We were also supported by CAICID. And I should also acknowledge the encouragement and inspiration of the former Special Representative of the UN Secretary General on Violence Against Children, Marta Santos Pais, who stood with us through this process. So why did we undertake this study? It is quite true that religious traditions were involved at the very inception in the formulation of this convention, and there's been a lot of cooperative work between the religious traditions of the world and human rights or child rights advocates and workers. But we feel that this cooperation could be much better than it currently is. So our aim is to try to foster cooperative relationships for the well-being of children and the prevention of child violence between religious traditions and NGOs. And so in this study, we invited the religious traditions to reflect on the ways in which the teachings of their own traditions intersect with the CRC, because we feel this is the basis. It is not simply trying to use each other to accomplish your own agenda, but finding genuine shared values on the basis of which religious leaders and community activists can work with human rights activists for the flourishing of children. And so there were many common points. I just mentioned three. The most important for us is the belief that in the world's religions that children deserve to be treated with dignity. The children have an intrinsic dignity, and on the basis of which there should be no discrimination against children on the basis of race, ethnicity, ancestry, gender, socio-economic status, and so on. Secondly, the value of the family is one that is commended both in the CRC and in our religious traditions. And the third I would mention is a concern for the holistic development of the child, physical, emotional, mental, and not very many people know that the CRC also speaks about the spiritual well-being of the child. This is a very great and important resource for world religions. Now, we were also concerned, and so and very diligently we worked to get the religious traditions that were part of this study to be self-critical. Because we recognize also that while there is a great potential in the religious traditions to be advocates for the rights of the child, religions have also been complicit in violence against children. And there are so many examples that we have given in this study. For example, not speaking out against child marriage, not speaking out or looking carefully at the sexual exploitation of children, or condoning patriarchal structures that disempower girls in the community. So you will find in this study a deep and humbling acknowledgement by many of the religious traditions that they are part of the solution, but they also have to acknowledge that they have also been part of the problem. So we do hope that this study will serve as a bridge between advocacy for human rights and the religious traditions, and to develop a much better partnership, keeping in mind the well-being of children.
Thank you very much. What are your recommendations for action for religious leaders so they can listen more to children, and how they can help in advocating for ending violence against children?
There are many suggestions that we make in this study. While we discovered that there are many core values that are shared between the CRC and the world religions, we also discovered that religious traditions have a lot to learn from the CRC, and that we want to promote the study of the CRC in religious communities. And I'll give you two examples. Two of the core principles of the CRC are, first, always putting the interests of the child. And secondly, encouraging the right of the child to be heard in communities. Now, we found that these are the two principles that have not perhaps received as much attention in religious communities as they should be. In the sense that in so many cases we have seen where religions condone child violence, what happens is that the interest of the institution is what takes precedence over the well-being of the child. So we're saying, take the CRC principle of the interest of the child as a primary value and look at your tradition to see how do you sustain this. And secondly, how do you in your communities hear children? What are the mechanisms? What are the spaces that you give to children in the community so that their voices are part of the religious, your religious traditions? We formulated a number of questions, which I'll just briefly mention, that we want to circulate within the religious community. So, number one, are all children listened to in your community? Secondly, are all children considered as individuals in their own right? Thirdly, are all children protected by leaders and religious communities? Fourth, are all children given spaces and opportunities to genuinely participate in the life of your communities and in your houses of worship? Are practices harmful to children within your community? Are there practices harmful to children within your community that are contrary to your own religious values or cultural norms? We think that if we could, with these questions, generate discussions within the religious communities, this could be the 30th anniversary of the CRC could also be a transformative moment for religious traditions and their care for children, as well as the forging of partnerships. So finally, if you want to read our report, it's available at arigatu.org. It's online. Please take a look at it. arigatuinternational.org. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And Lucas and Salamata, would either you two like to ask any more questions of our group? We've still got a little time, or you can ask a question to the other member if you like.
Je to moc rychle.
Lukáš just said it was too quick for him.
Salamata, please.
Monsieur Anantanan, quels sont les défis que vous avez traversés pendant vos recherches?
So what are the challenges that you faced during while you were doing this research with religious leaders?
I think the challenges that we face is convincing some of our religious leaders that the CRC is a document that they should take seriously, that there is a lot to learn from a document that didn't emerge out of the religious communities, even though we tried to show how religions were involved in the formulation of the CRC. Because the general perception of the CRC as a sort of a document coming out of the secular world is one that is sort of a deterrent to them to engage. So part of our challenge was saying, no, let's study the document, let us look at our own values and see where these coincide. And convincing them also that the CRC document, which also has legal implications for the states that ratify it, could be a very useful tool for their own work for children. That they could hold states accountable on the basis of this document. So convincing them to take the document seriously and showing them how this document can serve their own purposes in caring and protecting children from violence. These were the challenges. You know, there's a long road ahead, Salimata, that we recognize, but with your help, because one of the things that we did as we worked on this study is to bring children and to listen to them also. So their voices are also in our study. So we need each other. We need the children. Together, I think we can make that difference.
Thank you so much. And just to close this session, I'll ask this question to you, Howard. What's the one thing that we should do? What's the one action that you're asking us to take out of this room today?
I think it repeats what I think it was Henrietta said earlier on. I think we have to take this conversation to new audiences. I think it's compelling, it's persuasive, we have the data, we know what the evidence is. We can take it to new audiences in ways that is neither sensationalist, nor sanitizing the issues, the very serious issues of violence, abuse and neglect against children, but also not in a council of despair, saying there are huge numbers of children, what do we do about it? It's a huge number. Most people, when I share with them who aren't involved in the work like many in the room are truly shocked at the number and the sorts of violence that happens at home, at school, in communities, online, in institutions. But as I say, we have to reach those audiences, take it to much wider audiences of the broader public as well as leaders across sectors, but in a way that isn't a council of despair. It's one of saying there's a serious issue, it's the right thing to solve this, it's in our interest to solve it, and we can solve it.
And Professor Anantanand, the same question for you. What's the thing that you'd like us to walk out and actually do following this session?
I think to recognize that we have, first of all, if we come from places of religious meaning, we ground ourselves in religious traditions, that we have deep, shared, core teachings in all of our traditions that motivate us to work for the well-being of children and to protect them from violence. And this should be at the top of the concerns of our religious communities. And secondly, I want our religious communities to understand that they need those who are working for children in the human rights field. That in partnerships, our future is in partnerships.
Thank you. And so thank you, Howard, thank you, Professor Anantanand, but thank you especially Lucas and Salimata. That was very well organised. Thank you so much. Thank you too to our translators. Thank you for doing that. So as we bring this session to a close, I'd like to thank all of the three children, youth that we had helping us, to Lucas, to Salimata and to Toe. And I'd also like to invite one of our other colleagues, Meg, to just give us her closing remarks on everything we've heard over the last hour. Thank you, Meg.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Many great things have been said. I don't want to repeat it because I think this morning we've been hearing a lot of patterns about the state of the world's children and some of the trends that are very evident that we have to address in this next decade or so on ending violence against children and realizing child rights. But I'm going to say just one thing, and then it will lead to just a little bit of a framework, and then I'll cease and desist, because I know that you all have other meetings to go to. I was at the UN General Assembly in 1989 when the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child was adopted. Jim Grant was the executive director at the time. The treaty had been drafted for 10 years during the Cold War, which is a very contentious period in history, and it was very interesting that governments from different perspectives would come together over a 10-year period and agree on what was due to children. And at that period, there was an NGO drafting committee that would meet side by side when the treaty was being drafted. And when the adoption came forward, I remember which government it was the State Department for the US said, had it not been for NGOs, this would not have happened. So this treaty really was the heart and soul of NGO work. UNICEF came in at a certain point and took it and amplified and brought it up in a way that only UNICEF can do. Several months after the treaty was adopted at the UN, the first World Summit for Children was held with 72 heads of state, and then the treaty was rapidly ratified. So again, all the different layers of partnership and possibility that emerged from NGOs meeting annually, convened by governments who were putting aside a lot of very polarized differences, moving to the executive director of UNICEF taking this out and bringing it up and out and getting the political will to have this most rapidly ratified treaty in history. When I was listening today, I thought of 3 Ps. Number 1, prevention. The one thing we still talk about and continue to talk about and have to keep talking about is prevention. We can't wait for the pathology to set in. We have to constantly be looking at new and better ways to prevent the things that are happening from children. To children. I'm thinking of violence, but there's a lot of other issues as well when we look at that survival, development, protection, and participation framework by which we look through all the articles in the treaty. The second P is participation. And I mentioned earlier that just survival, development, protection, and participation framework for the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. 30 years ago, we were really weak on child participation. The treaty really put forward this right on the right of the child to be heard, which was a little bit revolutionary at the time. It was according to the evolving capacities of the children. I don't recall which government put it in. But once again, it's NGOs who have taken child and youth participation and brought it out. And I've seen amazing cultural shifts, and I think that has to do a lot with the religious thinking around young people. Not that we look at children as agents, or as passive beneficiaries, but as actors in their own right, and very much entitled to having their own rights. And we have religious traditions that believe that that's the child's inherent right to life and survival, and that has a resonance with the UN Treaty. And I think what Anant brought out when he talked about his study with a lot of humility is that very particular role of religious values with that treaty and moving that forward, because there are billions of people on this planet who are religious believers, and we have to bring those 2 pieces together, the belief in the inherent right of the child and religious beliefs and tenets. And then the final P is partnership, and we're seeing it here with Howard and the Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children. I'm thinking of the Joining Forces partnership that we started with Andrew's very involved in that with 6 child-focused agencies. I'm thinking of all the things that have happened over the last 10, 20 years, all the partnerships that came up, whether it was Gavi or Sun and others, the education. People coming together under a framework saying, you know what, this is not right. We have to have an organized framework to make change. Lots and lots of work to be done, but I've just seen this amazing shift in global consciousness to say that, children's rights, or human rights, that we have to make concrete changes that are measurable and impactful. And even though we get discouraged at times, I think we've got some new evidence to suggest that with the right data, we can prevent violence against children. We can prevent a lot of children from dying from preventable diseases. But most importantly, we're changing the world now with children. And we just begin to see the tip of the iceberg of what's possible. So those are a few things I'd like to just end with. And you've all been great. You're sitting here so attentive. I'm sure you have a million things to do. But Andrew, thank you for bringing us together. And thanks to UNICEF and to everyone here.
Thank you so much. And just before we go, if I could just ask Lucas, Salamata and Till just to stand, please. That's it. And to turn and face these people behind you.